Kathy. Thanks for that great introduction. And this is Linda Troop, my best friend, and she and I are going to be starting cooking demonstrations. So y'all are going to be seeing more of us. And if you would like to know about when we're doing cooking demonstrations, they're going to be free. So don't worry about that. Please put your email in the chat box, and we would be glad to add you to the mailing list to let you know when we are doing those. So we are using recipes from Dr. Guthrie's book, Eat Plants, Feel Whole. And we all kind of know about those feeling whole while we're on a plant-based diet. The very first thing, Kathy had sent out the recipes to all of you, and they're on a sheet. I printed them up. The first thing we're going to start with is the end in mind, as Stephen Covey, isn't that what Stephen predicts or promotes? Start with the end in mind. And the very last thing we're going to be using is a cheese sauce, but we have to cook that cheese sauce. And so we're starting with Vitamix. And just to let you know, the Vitamix and the Salad Master are sponsors for the Food for Life International program through the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So I always like to tell you a little bit about this. I am sure that there are a lot of people on this viewing that already have a Vitamix because y'all know how fabulous it is. But if you don't, I just want to say it is great when you are using or preparing meals like this. If you're making a hummus, Linda, I know you like making hummus. It just makes the job a whole lot easier. Okay, so following the recipe, we are going to start with 1 cup of water, which is already in here. The recipe called for cashews. And since I have taught a whole lot of people with diabetes and heart disease, how important it is to stay away from added fat, I just really want to practice what I preach. So I have always preached that. And so instead of cashews, I am going to add that creaminess with a white potato. And this was just a medium-sized white potato. Okay, the next thing that we have on here is our sweet pepper. And Linda is playing Vanna, not Vala, Vanna.
Vanna White.
Hopefully Vala is on the podcast or on the live stream. But we are adding our peppers. Did you show those?
Yes, these are.
Okay.
Everyone see those? Oops.
Boy, that Vitamix is a real hit with this group. We've had somebody who's had one for 40 years.
Oh my goodness, that is awesome. Okay, I also need to acknowledge that my husband is the wonderful man behind the camera, and he is going to try to zoom in and make this as wonderful as possible, okay? So the next thing that we are adding is the nutritional yeast. And I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with nutritional yeast, but certainly it is the way to get a cheesy flavor in our food without the animals, okay? So also in here, I have added my other dry ingredients, such as my onion powder, my garlic powder, and it calls for celery salt. But once again, if you've been in any of my classes, I do not do salt. So I have used celery seeds in place of salt. Now, if you are a person who wants salt, go for it. You know, that is perfectly fine. And the recipe did call for salt, but I am one of those who do not do that. The other thing I'm adding to this, you have your choice of tapioca flour or cornstarch. Now, most people probably have cornstarch in their cabinet. This is something you're going to hear me say. You can make this your own. So we use the cornstarch because I had it. I was not going to run out and buy tapioca flour just to make this recipe. But now, if you have been doing this a long time, you probably have the tapioca flour already available. The last thing I'm adding in at this time is lemon juice, and I already squeezed that. So I'm going to go back to the Vitamix. It's going to be a little bit loud, but it's not going to take too long, okay?
Okay. And while you're doing that, I just want to read the note Ken gave, was that you can get nutritional yeast at Greenwise in the bulk bins.
Okay, so now we are going to add this to our Salad Master 10-inch skillet. And then our recipe says to take a cup of hot water and clean the blender with it. And so, you know, I have to once again tell about our backup crew, and that's my husband. He made sure my kettle of hot water was ready to go for this. So, you know, I just have to thank him for all of these ways he helps me. So once again, we're just going to clean this. It's going to be fast. Okay, so I'm going to stir the hot water in here, and then we're just going to put it on and let that warm up. Okay, you want to take that. Okay, so this is going to be warming while we do everything else. Also, I have a chili pepper over here, and I'm going to add it at this time to our pot. Any questions so far?
Not yet, Debbie. I'm watching it.
Okay, awesome.
But
Okay.
you're welcome to put it in chat if you have an opportunity or a question.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start our taco salad. And of course, the cheese sauce is for the taco salad. The taco salad calls for, let's see, yep, that's yours. I mean, this is the one we're using. Okay, it calls for rice, and I am using barley instead. One of my favorite dietitians, can you see those? One of my favorite dietitians, Brenda Davis, who has written countless books and has sold over 1 million copies of them, she recommends using barley instead of rice. And let's get them out of the way. So anyway, these are the barleys that we're using. Actually, today I'm using purple barley. Once again, if you have a recipe and that calls for rice and you don't have rice, you can use quinoa, you can use barley, farro. There are many grains that you can use and substitute for them. Linda, what type of grain do you usually like?
Well, because I'm kind of just getting my oars in the water with this whole food process, I usually use rice.
Rice?
Yes.
Okay. So the next thing on the list is red cabbage. And I was just listening to Dr. Greger talk about red cabbage. And he said, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, go with red cabbage, because the nutritional value and the cost is just, you just can't beat it. So I love red cabbage. The great thing about it, not only nutritionally, but it is cheap. Getting a whole head of red cabbage is about $253 if you're buying organic. And also with this, it lasts quite a while in the refrigerator. You can cut it and you can cover it up and you can save, you know, portions of it. So it really does last a long time.
Debbie, I've got two things. First of all, if we're making it along with you, which I am, I'm making it with you. If we're making the salad, do we put the salad in first and then put that stuff on top of it?
Are you making one serving, Kathy, or a big one?
Yeah, one serving.
Yes. So put the rice or barley, whatever your starch is, put that on bottom, and then you put this on the side. Yes.
Okay, great. And then we also had a question about how hot was the water when you were making the sauce?
It was boiling.
Boiling. Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. And you know what? Let me just stir that up. I'm glad you said that because I didn't stir afterwards.
The one problem with red cabbage that I have is when I'm cutting it up for a recipe, I'm eating it faster than I can get it put in the recipe.
That does seem to be one of my problems as well. And that's why you always have it on hand, right?
Yes, always.
Debbie,
Actually,
we have another question. Do I
Uh-huh.
want to know about this unique grinder thing you're doing the cabbage with?
well, I'm glad you asked that question. And this is a Salad Master food processor. And it is something that I use on a daily basis. And I do want to say that I would be happy to tell you how to get one of these free if you leave your phone number or your email in the chat box. I would be glad to tell you how to get one of these free. Because as I said, Salad Master is a sponsor of Food for Life, and they provide all of these wonderful things for me to use. And this is something that I use all the time.
As a quasi-beginner, it's really helpful.
Yes. And
It
so,
saves time.
yeah, so look how fast this puppy goes.
That's how I ground up my red cabbage too.
And if you're using the old-fashioned grinder, you may be there just a little bit. And I want to mention to you that the core of the cabbage is very important. I chopped up most of it, but it really does help prevent excess gas. So, you know, a lot of people stay away from cabbage, and is it peptin? Peptin. So the core has peptin in it. I always say it wrong. I always want to say pepsin instead of peptin. But the pepsin we know is also for heartburn. So I got my red cabbage, I have my barley, and I have my green cabbage. The next thing I am going to do is zucchini. Now the recipe calls for, what does the recipe call for, Kathy?
Zucchini? I cucumbers.
It calls for cucumbers. Now, I don't know if cucumbers is one of those things. Maybe I'm going to put Laura Goolsby on the spot. Maybe you can tell me later on. You know how some people just absolutely despise, what is that, cilantro? I am one of those, but I also despise cucumber. It does not like me whatsoever. So here I am using zucchini instead. So as I said, folks, if you don't have something that the recipe calls for, or if you don't like something that the recipe calls for, such as cucumber, don't steer away from the recipe. Just make it your own. And I'm making this my own. But unfortunately, Linda loves cucumber, but
That's
she doesn't
okay.
get it in my house.
That's okay. It's not a problem.
And what is that saying? While in Rome, do as the Romans
That's
do.
right. That's right.
So today, Romans are not eating the cucumber.
Well, I'm eating them. And let's see, Dorothy asked if you have ever used Napa cabbage instead for your cabbages and recipes.
You know what? I haven't, but that's an excellent idea. And you know what? I had this beautiful bowl for y'all to see, but I can see already that we're out of space. So I'm going to transfer. I wanted to use this beautiful glass bowl so that y'all could see what I was doing, but it's going to be too much. So let me just change. Okay, so let's see, I need to do one more zucchini. I'll do the small one. And I'll just have to show y'all what this beautiful recipe looks like after I toss it together. Okay, so that is so far where we are.
Deb, you doubled this, did you, the recipe?
Yeah, I did kind of double this. And let me tell you why. Last week, I made this for one of my classes and I absolutely loved it. And I thought, that went way too quickly. So today I doubled it because I want it to last several days. Now I have my black beans, and this is another important piece, folks. I don't know if y'all bought chili beans or not, but if you look at the can of chili beans, and that's what the recipe calls for, if you looked at the can, you would see that one serving, so that would be a half a cup, has 870 milligrams of sodium. 870, and that's just for the beans. So I couldn't do that. Once again, I already said about the celery salt, I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to go there with this chili beans. So I'm using just black beans. I have my red peppers already chopped up.
So Deb, why should we be so concerned about our sodium? I mean,
well, a lot of us, as we grow older, we have a tendency to get high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is a consequence, or it can lead to heart disease. It can lead to a heart attack and stroke, and it's something that we don't want. Our diabetes and our heart disease folks need to limit their sodium to 1,500 milligrams a day. So just think about that 870. That's way over half of what you're supposed to have over the whole day. Now, I have tomatoes, and I'm just wondering, you know what? I don't believe the red peppers were, yes, I don't think the red peppers were actually part of the recipe, but as I said, I'm doing this on my own. You know, this is my shot. This is what I enjoy. And red peppers kind of go with a taco flavoring. At least I think so. And then I have corn. So if you have a taco bowl, it may look something very similar to this. And this is just a giant taco bowl that's going to feed us for several days. So isn't that beautiful? And when I say several days, it actually is going to be a whole lot more than the several days, because I'll probably freeze some of this. And, you know, I like to tell people, or, you know, encourage them to make something, especially if they love it, to make enough of it and freeze it. All of these ingredients freeze very, very well. And they just make a beautiful blend. Now, Linda, do you want to grab the shell that we prepared? Okay, so we have, it will show up right here. Okay, so when we do our taco shell, or when you're having company, you don't necessarily have to do this all the time if you don't want to, but why not make it fancy, right? So I don't know if you've ever purchased these shells, but these are shells that you can take a regular tortilla shell, put it in there. And these are the tortilla shells that we are using, the Extreme Wellness wraps. And those can be found at Publix, at Sam's, or at Walmart. And so we make these shells. You just bake them. And then you can add this. You can add the salad right to it. And when your cheese sauce is done, you can add it on top. So look how beautiful this is. I want to show this to you. See how gorgeous that is? All of the colors. And you know, one thing Brenda Davis recommends is that we have a lot of variety, and I'm sure it's in Dr. Guthrie's book too, but Brenda, I've been reading Brenda's book, so she's fresh on my mind, but she talks about having variety in our diet. And over a week, we want to have at least 30 different items to eat. So think about variety.
And Debbie, on your shell, what temperature and how long did you put that in the oven to get that nice shell?
Oh, that is great question, Kathy. We put it in at 350, and Linda was doing this. She is really the shelf queen, the shell queen. Okay, so she was doing this, and I think it was 350, and then we also baked them for what, 15 to 18 minutes?
Yeah, you have to check them, and you have to flip them typically, except for the molds. Don't worry about the molds. The molds are good. Just put them on a baking sheet. Use your mold. Put it on a baking sheet, flip, and put them in the oven. And the chips, you can just put on the baking sheet.
Yeah, so we were using the silicone mat, and if you don't have a silicone mat, you can always use parchment paper.
They just tend to brown a little faster with parchment paper.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the recipe calls for having salsa on the side along with avocado, so we have that, and it also calls for chips, and we actually made some smaller chips. And if you are just having this on the side, you can put a few chips on top. Of course, with that shell, you don't necessarily need that. Okay, so.
Okay, Debbie, can I show this real quick?
Yeah.
This is what we make our chips out of. And another way to do them is we put them in the the microwave. 1 minute, cut triangles, put them on a plate, put in the microwave. 1 minute, turn them. 1 more minute, turn them, and 30 seconds. And that's what our chips look like. So they're just like Debbie's, but we just do it in the microwave. This is available at the, it's the health food store in Winter Haven. What's the name of that one?
Healthy Habits?
Healthy Habits.
Yeah, they have it. Okay.
And what's the name of that, Kathy?
It's called Food for Life.
Okay.
And it has no oil in it, so it's nice. Just sprouted corn, water, and it does have a little salt, unfortunately, but not much.
Okay, and also we are using these corn tortillas for the chips, and you can find this brand, at Aldi's.
No oil.
There is no oil added to them.
Good.
So no fat added. And unfortunately, these Extreme Wellness does have a gram of fat in them.
And Debbie, that's what you use for the big bowls, right?
And that's what I use for the big bowl, exactly. And actually, we tried using the fat-free, what we made the tortillas out of, and they came out to be little tartlet things. So we could not have a salad unless we had 5 of them maybe, so.
Okay, Deb, I think Sue made it. Sue, did you finish yours? I finished mine. And Robert will eat this, and I'll put a salad on top of it. It's probably not enough for you to see. Sue, did you get yours made? Not yet. Okay.
Okay, so we are going to transition. I do want to show you the cheese sauce. And the cheese sauce looks absolutely beautiful. Angel, can you see how gorgeous that is? Now, this is salt-free and this is also fat-free. And so this is something that truly you can enjoy. And we have that jalapeno in there. So if you like a kick, you probably would love this. And you can warm that up in your microwave. My head's cut off. You can warm that up in your microwave without any problem. Okay, so we're moving these and we're going into our next demo here, and that is going to be our colorful quinoa salad. And we're going to use a zucchini once again, and the zucchini is in place of the cucumber. Wait, is it? Yes. So once again, an English cucumber was recommended, and I'm going to do this first. Kathy, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we did. Thank you for asking. The cheese sauce, was it thick?
Yes, well, I'm actually letting it stay on just a little bit longer. It
Okay.
was probably about 75% done, but I'm going to leave it on just a hair longer. Okay.
And while you're grinding that, Sue, can you hold your bowl up? I don't know if we can see it.
Linda's not.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? That's a bowl too, Sue. I like that. Oh no, that's on a tortilla.
No, we don't
Shoot.
need that.
Yeah, great. And if you can't see her, you can always do the little arrow of our pictures and you can see her.
Okay. I didn't see her. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, you want to hold it up again?
Beautiful, Sue.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, it
thanks.
needs to be higher for the camera to see.
We need a spotlight on it.
There it is. It looks good.
That's very
Okay.
colorful.
Okay, so I am chopping up my zucchini. And, you know, we were talking earlier before we got started, and we were asking what we like for lunch. And truly, when you have salads like this, you're really getting a very healthy, but also a raw salad. You know, you can add cooked things, of course, to this, but a lot of the ingredients are raw and they're just so healthy for you. You're not messing up any of the nutritional value. So it's just a great way to get all of your nutrients.
What is that, Deb?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm just dumping.
Yeah.
I'm talking and dumping. So I have yellow bell pepper. So it called for the yellow bell pepper. And so we have this chopped, and we know our bell pepper is full of vitamin C, and we are getting really close to our flu season. We have a pandemic, but we're going to be walking into flu season really soon. So we know that we need to get as much vitamin C as we can to really support our immune system. So I like to really make sure that I have a lot of these high vitamin C nutrients in my meals. We are adding some red pepper to this, red bell pepper. And then I have some chopped up scallions. Now, do I have anybody who does not like scallions? You can put that in the chat box and Kathy can tell me about that.
Okay.
Because why I'm saying that is, you know, sometimes people don't like onions and they don't like them raw. So if that's the case, you could water saute those onions so that they're not quite as strong. we do know from what Dr. Greger talks about is that we want to be able to cut our onions. We also want to cut our garlic. Those are both in the allium family, and we want to let them sit for at least 5 minutes. So I think these onions have been,
Right. We could,
their active ingredients are very much active.
they're good to
So
go.
Debbie, we did have one that doesn't cure for it. So you're saying that if you cook them a little bit, then that'll take the taste away? I mean,
That will take the strong taste away, yeah. And actually, when you cook them, and you can water saute them, or you could do it in a dry pan. Don't do the oil, of course. But when you are doing that, it actually makes them a little bit sweeter and more palatable. Now, the recipe, I'm not positive if the recipe has a typo or not, because it calls for 12 ounces of black olives. And a can of black olives is actually, once you drain it, is 6 ounces. So that would be
A lot of olives.
that would be a lot of olives. You know, Salt Queen here, that would be a lot of salt, but it would also be a lot of fat as well. So I am using these individual olives. They are 1 ounce each, and I am adding them to the recipe. Now, I practiced this last week as well. Sometimes these little snack packs are easier for kids to get into than adults. Okay, but I practiced this last week. The olives were very, very tasty in the recipe, so certainly I don't want to get rid of the olives, but I don't want to use 12 ounces of olives, so I'm going to leave that up to you.
Yeah, there's fat in the olives too, right?
There's a lot of fat in the
So
olives,
that's
yeah.
something, particularly for heart disease, if that's something that you're concerned about.
Step over so they can see who's talking.
So that would be something to be concerned about, is the fat in the olives.
Exactly.
And the salt,
And
of
the
course.
salt as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do are the seasonings. And we have the seasonings on there. Linda, do you want to call those out?
Sure. We have a teaspoon of garlic powder. We have, you added some other things, Deb?
Is it just the garlic powder?
Yeah, garlic powder.
Okay, so the other thing that I like to add is onion powder. And I also like to use Mrs. Dash. Of course, if we are eliminating our salt, we want to make sure we still have flavor. So Mrs. Dash herb and garlic is usually what I use, or garlic and herbs. So I added a teaspoon of that to this recipe as well. Also, I also added, I squeezed 3 lemons to get our 6 teaspoons or tablespoons of lemon, but I also added some of the zest of the lemon on or in this as well, because that's just going to enhance the flavor. And by the way, Linda is reminding me that we need to talk about this, but quinoa. So the quinoa is something that we use a lot of. This came from Sam's, and it's a very, very good price, but you will see that it is 4 pounds. So I mentioned that it is organic, and you can zoom out now. It is organic. It is a great, great price. And I say that because so many people say that, you know, it's expensive to eat like this. And if you shop around, if you're going to be using something on a regular basis, why not buy it in bulk? Because, excuse me.
The shelf life is fairly
long,
isn't it?
exactly, exactly. So now we're going to add our lemon juice to this recipe, and we're going to toss. And once again, you know, this recipe says it's a colorful quinoa salad. Is anybody making this one? Or did everybody make the taco salad?
Last, it was in the car.
I made the taco, Sue made the taco. I don't know if anybody said. Let's see if they said anything.
Laura had her thumb up.
Okay, so this is nicely tossed. The smell is fabulous with the lemon juice.
The lemon really does enhance it. You can tell. You can
Yeah.
smell it. Wonderful.
Okay, and there is our gorgeous quinoa salad. So, see how beautiful those colors are? So we're going to put all of our salads out, and let me pour the cheese sauce. I don't know if we actually need, why don't we put the small one out?
Okay.
And let me grab the cheese sauce. And that's what we have the bowl for.
I think Laura's making made the quinoa one. Let's see. Laura, can you hold it up? Ah, there. Oh, that looks good.
It does look good.
Yeah, I like that bowl too.
Laura, did you run into any obstacles that you could share to make this process easier or better when you made yours? Did you notice anything that would be helpful with the recipe?
You can unmute yourself. No.
Okay, so there is our cheese sauce. And this is it.
Pleasure for me to be with you this morning, and congratulations on everyone who's working on chewing and chatting towards better health. I kind of got interested in lifestyle medicine on my journey through medicine and through life. Of course, I had biochemistry class, which is an awful lot of nutrition, when I was in medical school and even in college. And then, as has been mentioned, I had a practice on the island of Guam, working with a group of other physicians. And it was there that I had a rather, life-changing experience. It was a patient that came into the office, an Italian businessman. Didn't expect to have a lot of Italian businessmen in the middle of the Pacific, but that's where he was. He showed up in my office with a skin lesion of some kind that he would like me to look at. I took a look at it. It took me a couple of minutes to figure it out. It was yellow and raised and flat, and didn't itch at all, no redness. It was just there. And I said, that looks an awful lot like a cholesterol deposit in the skin. Let's get a blood test and see what your cholesterol is. If it's high, I'm sure that that's a cholesterol deposit, and I won't need to biopsy it. So I sent him off to the lab work. Now that was not a hard thing to do. I got out the little paper and checked off the things that I wanted tested. I remembered back to medical school that people who have high cholesterol are more likely to be overweight, and he was overweight. People with high cholesterol were also more likely to have hypertension, and what do you know, his blood pressure was a little high. And I also knew that from medical school that if the cholesterol was high, you're more likely to have diabetes. So I asked for a blood sugar check too. When I saw him back the next week, his cholesterol was really super high. Total cholesterol was over 300. I said, that's a cholesterol deposit. We don't have to worry about that. Except we should get your cholesterol down for your health because that increases your risk of a heart attack. So we talked a little bit about diet. And then my eyes went down the page and I saw his fasting blood sugar. His fasting blood sugar was over 200. Now, in those days, we made the diagnosis of diabetes with a blood sugar over 140. Well, he had a fasting blood sugar over 200. And I know I was supposed to do it the second time, but, you know, it was pretty high. So I said, does anybody ever tell you had diabetes? And he said, no, nobody did. I said, well, it looks pretty suspicious here. And I explained a little bit about diabetes and how medication works. And I told him, we need to do lifestyle. Often in my experience, people who have sugars as high as yours need to go further than that. So we talked about oral medication. And what was interesting to me was when I made that that reference to possibly needing insulin, that Ralph responded emotionally. He, like a volcano, erupted, and he said, Doc, I don't care what happens, I will never take insulin. Well, I'd been learning some things about how the body puts together this disease, and I said, okay, tell you what, if you'll do what I tell you to do, as long as your numbers are getting better, I won't say a thing about pills. I won't say a thing about insulin. And Ralph kind of hit the air with his fist, and he said, Doc, I'll do it. So I sent him off, got him a blood sugar monitor, and he started to monitor his blood sugar. So I'm back in a couple of weeks, and his blood sugar numbers were a little bit lower, and his hadn't checked his cholesterol yet, but his sugars were coming down. His weight had started to come down a little. With the lifestyle changes that I had recommended, he continued to improve and improve and improve. I still remember the last time I saw Ralph. It was about a year after I had had that first visit with him. And Ralph was doing amazingly well. His blood sugars were perfectly normal. Ralph said, Doc, I could hardly believe it. Last week I wanted to see what would happen, so I tried a little ice cream. And you know, my blood sugars didn't go through the roof. They stayed down very nicely. Ralph had lost 60 pounds. His blood pressure was normal. His cholesterol was at normal levels, and that was normal levels by those standards in those days. So, and he was on no medication. I had never thought this possible. Here was a reversal of hypertension, diabetes, the cholesterol issue, and of course weight. He had lost enough weight so he was no longer obese. He said he felt well. I said, that's amazing, Ralph. It's been a year, and here you are, so many changes. Those are radical things I recommended for you to do. And he said, no, Doc, there was one problem. And his brow furrowed a little bit, and so did mine. Well, what was that, Ralph? I said. Well, he said, Doc, this last year, I had 2 custom suits made, and when I got home, they were both too big. So then he smiled at me really big, and I knew that it was a victory and that I had been worried about nothing. He was fighting his disease and changing things. That experience changed my whole perspective on practice. As a matter of fact, I went back and did a master's of public health in nutrition, was able to teach nutrition for a while on a graduate level. I changed the focus to working on helping people reverse their diseases rather than simply giving them pills. And that has been really my joy ever since. Now, in order for you to understand a little bit about this process, before we open it up for questions, I'm going to share a couple of slides with you, or a few slides here, to talk about so you can understand where this diabetes, hypertension, heart disease comes from. Once you understand that, it's easy to understand how to go about treating it. So let me see if I can do what I can do about showing you a little bit of a slide here. So lifestyle diseases are many. We've mentioned the diabetes, the obesity, the hypertension, coronary artery disease. There's even this polycystic ovary syndrome, which is something that tends to bother women when they're a bit younger and they don't ovulate, so they have some irregular menstrual bleeding. And of course, it's hard to get pregnant when that's the case. Even some cancers and other diseases tend to be lifestyle diseases. Well, to understand where they come from, we need to understand something about how life, the physiology happens. So let's talk about it from this little slide here. Now, this is my artwork. I hope you like it. On the right-hand side, you will see something that's supposed to look like a busy cell. Looks like something has cut off the Y there, so that bus means busy. And you can see there's a stomach with an esophagus coming down, and here comes some food into the esophagus and into the stomach where it's mixed up, and then it goes into the small intestine, is absorbed into the blood vessels, and then goes from there to the pancreas, and the pancreas responds by saying, I'm going to send out the Paul Revere hormone. Paul Revere hormone is insulin. Paul Revere, you know, he wasn't doing the fighting, he was just taking the message. And so this insulin hormone lets the busy cell know that there's some energy coming, and the cell opens up to let that energy come in. So that's a process. Now, if I'm running a race, let's say I'm doing the Disney Marathon. I've been training now for 2 months, and I'm well hydrated, the carbohydrate loaded. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, the gun goes off, bang, and I start running. That first mile or so, I'm using energy from the muscles, maybe some stored in there fat, a little bit of glycogen or carbohydrate, and second mile, third mile, fourth mile, and at the fourth mile there's a table, and on it is some stuff called Gatorade. So I grab a bottle and I jug it. I drink it down just as fast as I can. It has glucose in it, it has some electrolytes to replace that which I have lost, and it has, of course, some glucose. So hydration, glucose, and the salts, they go down. The glucose goes into the stomach. It's absorbed into the bloodstream. It goes into the pancreas. The pancreas lets go some insulin. And my thigh muscles, which are really busy helping me run, hear that insulin or see that insulin, and their response is, yes, I want it. So then they open wide up. I think that's what is supposed to be shown. Oops. Sorry about my slides kind of getting mixed up there. Those muscle cells open up wide to let the energy in. And that is a cell that's very insulin sensitive. So this is a little picture from a scientific article. There's some changes inside the cell. And then these little glucose transporters go up to the cell wall, and the glucose comes in. And my thigh muscles are very sensitive. Just parenthetically here, so you don't worry, this IRS here on the right side has nothing to do with the government, okay? Just wanted you to know that so you didn't worry. Okay, so thigh muscles say, I'm ready for that energy, and it opens up and those glucose molecules pour in. Now, the same race, the same Gatorade, the same insulin, and the muscles that run my eye, the little eye blinker muscles, you know, they don't need quite as much energy. Whether I'm reading a book or watching TV or running a race, it's all about the same. And so my little eye blinker cells don't need quite so much. So when that same insulin comes in, instead of saying, yes, I want it, they say, well, okay, I'll take a little. We've just learned a really important lesson. And what we know is that the cells in our bodies each decide how much energy they need and adjust for their need. Now, in order to understand what goes wrong with this type 2 diabetes and hypertension and the heart disease, we need to use another word picture, and that's what this particular slide is about. There's a lazy cell, and for some reason the Y fell off, so we'll call it a lazy cell. And I picture here a couch potato sitting in a recliner in front of a large screen TV with a couple of remotes. I see a bowl of ice cream that's been finished on the table. On the left side of the chair, I see a box of Oreos or package of Oreos with 1.5 rows gone. I hear crinkly bags. Is that Cheetos or is that potato chips? I see 2 6-packs of something. And if I know the couch potato, the strongest muscles there are those necessary to pop the next tab or open the next crinkly bag. Now, that's a lot of calories coming in. And I can tell you those thigh muscles are not really interested in all that energy. Notice the arrows are a little bigger on this picture. There's a lot of calories going in. They're coming through the stomach. They're going into the blood vessels. And they are, of course, the message is going to the pancreas. The pancreas is putting out a lot of insulin because there's a lot of energy coming. And what do you think the lazy thigh muscle cell says? Remember, each cell decides how much energy it needs. While running a race, the thigh muscle needed a lot. But in the couch potato, it says things like, no, thank you. With time, it says, no, thank you, even louder. And with more time, it says, no, I don't want it. And when that happens, we say that the whole body has insulin resistance. So notice what happens here. Insulin levels tend to go up. Insulin tends to drive up the blood pressure, tends to drive up the weight. It increases the cholesterol. So all of these things are kind of tied together by this high insulin state, this insulin resistance. And this is how it starts. It goes on and affects the liver. The liver gets insulin resistance and starts to pour out more sugar. And at that point, we say people have diabetes. Before that, we call it prediabetes with the hypertension and the obesity. But understand that diabetes, these diseases are not something you catch. These are diseases that you earn. And you earn them by taking too many calories in and not putting enough calories out. Now, I've given this lecture to 5th and 6th graders. And when I get done, I say, okay, I'm the patient, you're the doctor. How are you going to treat me? And you know, the 5th and 6th graders can figure that out. It's not too hard to figure out. The principle is rather simple. And indeed, this is the same thing that I told Ralph so many years ago, that life-changing experience for me. I said, Ralph, what you need to do is to focus on foods that are lower in calories. So I recommend it, for example. I mean, I'd like to use this example. I like apples. How many apples can you eat before you're full? Well, you know, it takes about 2 or 3 for me, and my stomach is full. But you could smash those apples up, put them, take the juice out, put it in a glass, and you have 7 to 8 apples worth of juice at the head of your knife, and you take that with the meal as if it's just a small thing. The fiber has been removed. It's concentrated sugar calories. Is apple juice bad? No, it's not bad, but an apple is better. We'd like to maximize the apple, the whole food, and minimize the refined food, the apple juice. My next favorite one, I guess, is corn. I remember a corn roast when I was a kid at the beach. I got 13 ears of corn down. Pretty good, huh? But what happens when that corn is smashed up? They take the oil out, they put it in a bottle, and it says no cholesterol because plants don't make cholesterol. You buy it from the grocery store, you make a salad dressing out of it, and you put a tablespoon of it on your salad. That tablespoon has around 15 or 16 ears worth of corn oil in it. Now, is corn oil bad? No, it's a lot better than some of the other oils one could eat, but the corn is better. Does that make sense? It made sense to Ralph. And finally, I gave him this one. I said, Ralph, do you eat grass? And Ralph said, no, what do you mean? I don't eat grass. Are you sure? I said, the cow eats grass. And the cow takes all the fiber out and drops it out behind. And he concentrates, excuse my humor here, all the calories. So when you get all the calories together, you tend to have too many calories. Remember, this particular disease process is caused by too many calories. So I explained to him it's much better for you to eat beans with a little bit of ground beef than to eat the whole steak. That would be a mistake. So you see, I'm kind of teaching him to move towards whole plant foods and to use animal products as condiments. Now, it's probably best, especially for people who are trying to reverse disease, to get off of animal products completely. But that's something that people can kind of learn with time. So that's kind of the story of Ralph, and that gives you an idea of how the disease comes about, or the diseases. It wasn't until the late 1980s that Gerald Reaven received the Banting Award from the American Diabetes Association for tying all these diseases together under too much insulin, that category. We ended up calling it metabolic syndrome. So it is still a very active disease, and there's a lot of people with it. And lifestyle is still the best choice for most everybody. Okay, that's my little presentation, and I know you've got some questions. So I'm going to expect that Kathy is going to pass those questions on to me, and I'll answer them best I can.
Okay, and if you have questions, like, it doesn't have to be about diabetes. Maybe you're concerned more about high blood pressure, or overweight and obesity, or maybe even heart disease. Put those in the chat box. So
It's all the same disease, so it's just a matter of degree. They all fit.
And if they're all the same disease, it sounds like then all of them could be helped, especially diabetes, by a diet that's higher in plants, with a plant-based diet. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. All of them tend to respond. I've got in my files a scientific study that looks at, one of the best protein replacements for animal is the legumes. It's very high in protein. And I've got a study that looks at all the studies looking at the effect of beans on hypertension, and it evaluates them. And what do you know? If you increase beans in your diet, your blood pressure comes down. So yeah, it works all across the spectrum.
And that was one of the things I was going to ask you about, was high blood pressure. So increasing beans is a good thing. Anything else?
Well, there are a lot of things, and as I've shared with you, much of this is related, it appears, to high insulin levels. So people who have hypertension, not all of them, but a good number of them, are in the category of the prediabetes or a metabolic syndrome, and they just don't have the full diabetes yet. That's certainly the most common type of hypertension. The nutrients that tend to help decrease hypertension include calcium, magnesium, potassium. So we like to have those go up. It's interesting that 98 or 99% of Americans do not get the recommended daily allowance of potassium. Now that's kind of interesting. Potassium ends up being maybe even more important than sodium. Many of us with hypertension are trying to lower our sodium intake, and that may be reasonable for some of us, although getting it too low is a problem. but it looks like it's actually the sodium-potassium ratio that is more important than just the sodium. And people are not getting enough potassium. So when we talk about potassium in foods, what foods have potassium? Well, it's fruits and vegetables. Just increasing the fruit and vegetables can help replace that important nutrient.
Okay.
About 50% of Americans, according to the Haynes study, are deficient in magnesium. People over 60, it's 80% are deficient in magnesium. Magnesium helps to relax the blood vessels and can help bring blood sugars down and weight down as well. So many of us are low in magnesium. So what are good foods for magnesium? Well, magnesium, you may remember from high school biology, is part of that chlorophyll molecule that takes sun energy and prepares it so we can use it. So it's really present highest in both greens and beans. So I'm a bean pusher, if we can put it that way. I like to tell people we're human beings and we should be eating beans. They've got good protein for us, number one. Number two, they're the highest in potassium, almost 3 times the amount of potassium in bananas. Everybody knows bananas, nobody knows beans for potassium. And of course, magnesium is also very high in those legumes as well.
Okay, great. Well, let's hear it for the beans. Okay, we've got some good questions here. First of all, we happen to have the person who's in charge of the master's program at Kaiser, registered dietitian program. Laura Goolsby's here. I don't know if you can raise your hand, Laura. Anyway, she said thank you very much. She appreciated that exclamation.
Oh, good.
Diabetes. What about restless legs? Do you have any insights on that?
Restless eggs is a new idea to me. I kind of like the slip, but that's okay. So restless legs is the only nutritional connection that I know to restless legs is that it seems to be related in many people to low iron. So the first thing I do when I find somebody with restless legs is to check and to make sure that they have an adequate amount of ferritin, which is a measure of the amount of iron that's inside their bone marrow, where they're actually making their red blood cells. And then we want to replace that. But iron itself, if you have too much iron, that can be dangerous. So especially the heme iron tends to increase inflammation in our bodies. So it's we try to replace the iron and get it up for people with restless legs. Other than that, it's a problem with a brain transmitter, and we have some medications that can help. But I do not know of any good lifestyle changes to help make the restless legs go away.
Okay. We've had several questions about high blood pressure. Like one person said, at the age of 82, what should be a normal blood pressure, especially if you're on medication? And then another was asking, what about being over-medicated to lower your blood pressure? How do you know when that's the case?
This is always a little bit of a challenge, and I'm happy to address those things. I will say this about hypertension. There is no kind of best or safe, safe is the wrong word. There is no best blood pressure. It ends up that, especially under natural states, the lower your blood pressure is, as long as it's reaching your brain, so you're not passing out, it's healthier for you. Your risk of stroke and heart attack tend to go up as your blood pressure goes up. They kind of chose 140, 150 over 80 because that's where the risk of stroke increases about 50%. It'd actually be better if you were lower. So lower is better as long as the blood is reaching your head. Now, when we talk about people who are a little bit older, what happens is the arteries get a little bit stiff. And if the arteries are stiff, they don't relax as much. That means the difference between the top number and the bottom number in your blood pressure measurement often gets rather wide. In someone 80 years of age, it's not uncommon for me to see 90 or 100 millimeters of mercury difference between the two. And that's telling me that those arteries are quite stiff. And so when someone gets a little nervous or worried, their body responds by raising the blood pressure. That's normal. Blood pressure should go up when you're moving. It should go up when there's an emergency of some kind. You climb up the stairs, you walk a distance. Yes, your blood pressure should go up a little bit, but people with stiff arteries will have their blood pressure, the top number, just jump up really high. And when they go into the doctor's office, you know, there's not much time to sit in the chair while the nurse takes the blood pressure. They want to get you into the room quickly. Technically, they're supposed to leave the blood pressure cuff or leave you sitting quietly for 5 minutes before they actually pump that blood pressure cuff up. I like to say you think about Hawaii or something very calming. We want to know the low blood pressure, not the anxious one. And because doctors' offices are in a hurry, it's common for older people to have hypertension and then get treated with medications to the point where they start not getting enough blood. And I know I had a patient with this problem. She would get nervous about something and check her blood pressure, and her blood pressure would go up, and she'd go to the emergency room. They'd admit her. Her blood pressure's over 200, and she would get 2 or 3 extra medicines. And as soon as she went home and calmed down, her blood pressure would drop. She'd have no energy. And when she stood up, she was in danger of falling over and breaking her hip. So it's very easy to over-medicate people, especially as they get older with stiff arteries. And that's something we want to watch very carefully. The United States Preventive Services Task Force recommends that older people have a blood pressure cuff at home, and they take that blood pressure regularly so they can report to their doctor what it is actually at home and at rest. So to try to help avoid the over-treatment of hypertension.
Okay.
So I hope that helps to answer those questions.
Oh, that was great. Those were really good answers to that that we hadn't heard before. What's the best way to get omega-3?
Haha. Now this becomes an interesting question. A lot of people think the only place that you get omega-3 is from fish. So everybody needs to get their fish so they get their omega-3. Well, this is a misconception. There are 2 kinds of fat that are called essential fats. There's omega-3 and omega-6. Animals do not make omega-3 or omega-6. Only plants make omega-3 and omega-6. So we get these as 18 carbon chains of fat, and we take them into our bodies, and we all have fish, humans, cows, pigs, chickens. We all have enzymes that take the plant essential fats, omega-3 and omega-6, and turn them into the longer chain fats we call fish oil, eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, DHA, etc. So we all have those enzymes as long as they're working correctly. So we are not required to get omega-3. When I was teaching graduate level nutrition to RDs who are working on their master's level degrees, I showed them, just to show you how long this was, overheads, right, with how much of the omega-3 is in cucumbers and tomatoes and just a variety of different vegetables. These plants all have them in it. Now, yes, some have more, and you've probably heard that flaxseed has lots of omega-3 and walnuts has lots of omega-3, but the truth is most all plants have some. Now, coconuts have very little, most of it's saturated fat, but they also have some monounsaturated fats. Avocados have monounsaturated fats. Olives have monounsaturated fats, but also have some of the omega-3 and the omega-6 oils. So these are present in plants. And as we eat them, our body can make those changes. Now, there are some things that interfere with those changes. One of those is arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is the long chain from the omega-6 side. It's very inflammatory. Our body does not want, so if it builds up too much in our body, it goes back up to the little factory that we all have that takes those fats and changes them into the special omega-3 fish oil type, and it blocks that enzyme. So that enzyme isn't working, and we're not changing it as easily. The average was about 18 omega-6 to 1 omega-3, and healthy is closer to 6 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. So that would be more what you got if you actually were eating the plants. The other thing that can interfere with the formation of our own body's own omega-3 fish oil is, and I put the fish oil there in quotes because it's ours and we made it, but it's what people think of as fish oil. The other thing that can interfere is trans fats. Trans fats have been changed, they're distorted, and when they get into that enzyme, they tend to plug it up and increase our risk of heart attack, decrease our omega-3s. So it's a rather complicated topic to discuss. Happy to answer more about it if folks have questions, but I hope that helps you understand. You don't have to get omega-3 from fish oil. You get it from plants when you're eating whole plants.
That's where the animals get it.
That's where the animals get it. That is exactly right. Animals cannot make it either. It's interesting. I saw an article years ago on paleontologic nutrition. And what they had found a cow that had been buried in a bog like 400 or 500 years ago. And by looking at the different types of fat inside the cow meat from the bog, they were able to say what the cow was eating and what things were like 400 or 500 years ago. Modern kind of farming methods have changed the bacteria in the gut of the cows. Instead of having omega-3, like the fish have now, they had a lot more omega-6. So things have changed from 500-600 years ago to today in how the animal products, the health of the animal products. Very interesting concepts in how this all works.
We have a question about kidney function.
Yes.
Member whose mother has hyperkalemia. Am I saying that right?
Hyperkalemia is high potassium in the blood, yes.
Okay. And it's at a cautious level for the normal kidney function and hypertension. So can you address the combinations of those and how they affect each other?
Well, do I understand that we have kidney failure?
She just says normal, it's at a caution level.
So the kidney is kind of moving towards
It sounds
failure.
like it the way that's
Okay.
written, yes.
So kidney failure is a bit of a challenge, and dietary requirements change when your kidneys fail. When you're getting close to dialysis, for example, you can't handle things like beans, legumes. The protein has to be absolutely to a minimum because protein is a bad stress on the kidney. Protein is made of amino acids. You hear the acid in there? And so that acid, extra acid, it goes through the kidneys. It does put stress on it. We know, for example, that people who have diabetes, if they're on a high animal protein diet, their kidney function will tend to drop. If they're changed over to plant proteins, it doesn't drop as quickly. It tends to protect the kidneys. Why is that? Because when you eat a whole plant, you're getting a bunch of buffers that are built into the plant that help to buffer the protein, meaning there's less stress on the kidney. As the kidneys get close to failing, they don't get rid of potassium very well either. So potassium tends to go up in the blood, and that can lead to dangerous things, including heart attacks, heart arrhythmias, etc. So once one gets close to kidney failure, a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet, becomes very difficult. Of course, once one goes on dialysis, then it becomes easier again, because then the potassium is managed, and even to some degree the acidity is managed. Kidneys are already shot, and so no longer really an issue. So when the kidneys are failing, they're not able to get fluid out, and the blood pressure tends to go up as well. That's one of those other causes of hypertension besides the usual one, which we call essential hypertension, or kind of the one that goes along with this metabolic syndrome. It's so related to diabetes.
I think
So I hope that helps with the
I might
question.
have asked the question incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
Asking how to handle hyperkalemia at caution level, but she has normal kidney function and hypertension.
The most common cause of high potassium is a blood draw where they had a hard time, or they used too small a needle and broke some of the red blood cells. So that would be the most common thing. Another possibility is medications, which tend to raise potassium. The other thing that can raise potassium is some adrenal diseases. I mean, a little tumor, for example, that's secreting a hormone that tends to make one hang on to potassium. So, you know, the picture that you painted is much more likely just needing to have another blood test to prove that the potassium is not too high. Although sometimes people who are put on medications for hypertension, like the ACE inhibitors, like lisinopril and others, that tends to raise the potassium. So we have to make adjustments in those sometimes. I hope that's beneficial.
I think that was, I think I didn't ask the question correctly. So I think you got it
well,
second time.
Hopefully people were helped by the first longer answer.
There you go. Probably a lot more people, so because that sounds like it's pretty specific.
Okay, so nitric oxide levels. We're hearing a lot about them. And of course, Dr. Esselstyn, who Skyped with us or Zoomed with us in January, he talks a lot about nitric oxide levels. Laura was curious, you know, what do you think about raising nitric oxide levels?
There are dangers from getting the arginine level too high. I'm not sure I would want to take arginine directly, but you're right, it is beneficial. Wait a minute, what did I just say? Did I say arginine or did I say nitroglycerin?
You said arginine.
Arginine, okay. Well, you'll excuse me, because when you say nitric oxide, I think arginine, because the body makes nitric oxide out of arginine. So if you take the nitric oxide by itself and it gets too high in the blood, it can cause trouble. But it's okay for you to take arginine in. This is the amino acid that our body makes nitric oxide out of. This is the blood vessel relaxing factor. Each arginine has this, it has the kind of protein end of it, and then it has a chain of carbons that come up, and 3 nitrogens, which the body then turns into nitric oxide. Mm-hmm. So foods, this is very interesting. There have been some studies done looking at arginine supplementation to help things like angina and peripheral vascular disease, where there's not enough blood going to your legs, and the legs run out of oxygen while you're walking. We call it claudication. You have to stop and rest and let the legs catch up. So giving 6 grams a day of arginine will help angina, and it will help peripheral vascular disease. So you could take it in a pill, I suppose. Interestingly, legumes are high in arginine too. So the plant proteins tend to be high in arginine and animal proteins tend to be lower in arginine. Kind of interesting. Even the effect of plant proteins on cholesterol versus animal proteins is something that's been teased out. It looks like it's the arginine glycine ratio that makes the big difference. You get enough arginine into the system and not so much of the glycine, and everything seems to do better. Cholesterol comes down, and weight is managed a little better. It's certainly much less stress on our body, and we make more of this nitric oxide, is the assumption here. Animal proteins tend to be lower in arginine and higher in glycine, and that's something that's been noted. We don't understand why it works, but we see the difference between the two. So yeah, I'm all for letting our body raise our nitric oxide by taking arginine. So I apologize for that little Freudian slip at the beginning. In my own mind, arginine and nitric oxide kind of are together because I'm looking for arginine in my diet to have a good nitric oxide level.
Or all the greens, like Dr. Esselstyn promotes eating the greens all throughout the day to help raise the nitric oxide. I think
Sure.
what some of us have been trying to do.
He is probably doing that for the antioxidant effect because what it's doing is decreasing the inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
The greens are really good at that. And of course, this is a surprise to people, but even greens have protein in them.
Right.
And they have fats in them as well. 9% of the calories in lettuce comes from fat. I didn't say 9% of lettuce is fat. I said 9% of the calories. Most of it is fiber and water. But if it's been alive, it's got protein in it, and it has fats in it, and probably some carbohydrates as well. So yeah, eating greens on a regular basis is definitely a good health move. It decreases inflammation, and yes, it's providing building blocks for the nitric oxide.
Perfect.
Kathy, you're going to need to unmute yourself.
What about B12? What about B12? Dr. McDougall told us about taking B12. Do you recommend that also?
Well, those of us who are plant-based eaters and eat no animal products would probably do a good job. It would be smart for us to take a little B12. We don't need a lot of it, but yes, B12 is beneficial. When B12 gets too low, it tends to increase the homocysteine in our bloodstream, and homocysteine increases inflammation. So even people who are eating plant-based can have an increased inflammation, maybe a heart attack even, from not having enough B12. So it just makes sense to have some of that.
Okay.
You should know that animals do not make B12. Bacteria make B12. So the B12 that the animals have in their meat comes really from bacteria. And it could be bacteria within their bodies, but more likely to be bacteria in the soil. The absorption of vitamin B12 is rather complex. It's supposed to mix with, in your saliva, something called an R factor, go into the stomach, and at the other side of the stomach, lateral is over to the intrinsic factor, which then makes a run to the end zone. And near the end of the small bowel, it's absorbed, and fairly effectively. Interestingly, the B12 from meat is poorly absorbed because you have to chew it so much. Most people don't chew it enough to release the B12. If you're getting your B12 from places like milks, it's much better absorbed. I would note here that when you purchase an almond milk or a soy milk that's commercially made, they'll add B12 to it, and that is absorbed very well as well. And then, of course, we have cereals that we use that have vitamin mixtures poured or sprayed on them, and that is absorbed very well as well. Interestingly, my mother-in-law, now, in October, 103 years of age, has been pretty much a vegan since she was around 35 years of age, where she had some health problems and made that change. So she has done very well. It's probably been 10 years ago. We said, well, Mother, how's your B12 level? Let's check it. Well, generally, we like to have that B12 level somewhere above 300. Some would say over 400. Well, here she is, not taking any supplements and, taking her soy milk and the cereals and those types of things. And her B12 level was over 1,000. So she had plenty of it. But, we don't know what's going to happen for everybody. So it's probably a good idea to take a little bit of that B12 just to make sure you don't come up short-shifted on it and suffer some negative effects from not having enough.
What are your thoughts on vitamin D supplements? Should we just get out in the sun or should we take a pill? Vitamin D.
Vitamin D, okay. Well, I'm going to step on Dr. McDougall's toes here, okay?
I was afraid of that.
I haven't had opportunity to really take this up with him because I want to do it in a rather polite sort of a way. Dr. McDougall quotes a couple, 3 studies that demonstrate that there's an increase in death when you give the vitamin D to people. Well, the studies he's referring to were done in older folks. Now, we're talking about nursing home people in Scandinavia type places where they don't see enough sun. And so the thought was maybe we can help keep people from falling, make their bones stronger by giving them vitamin D. And, we can give large doses of it, maybe once during the beginning of the winter when they can't get any sunshine. And then that should be able to help them through the whole winter. Well, it ends up that when you do a massive dose of vitamin D, you may kill somebody. So here's what happens. Calcium and magnesium, we've said a little bit about that, are very close cousins. They're both, we call divalent cations. They both inhabit the same place inside the cell. There's a lot of people, I've already told you that 80% of people over age 60 in this country are low in magnesium. When calcium is in the cell, magnesium is pushed out. If magnesium comes in, then the calcium needs to go out. So they need to be in balance with inside the cell. So most people are low in magnesium. Now let's give a huge dose of vitamin D. Vitamin D forces calcium not only into our bodies but into our cells, pushes out magnesium. And that magnesium deficiency, already on a magnesium deficiency, in my mind, is what's killing people. One of the reasons we don't have this nailed down clearly is because we do not have a good clinical way of measuring intracellular magnesium. Most of the magnesium is inside the cell. If you measure a blood level, it's not very accurate because it's just the extra that's floating outside. It's a tenth or less of a percent of the magnesium in the body is in the blood. Most of it is in the cells. So if you look at a reasonable dosing of vitamin D, vitamin D3, it is very reasonable to take it as a supplement, and it works well. There is a philosophical perspective that would tend to make me want to get it from the sunshine, but I work indoors. I was building a house at the time I first checked my vitamin D level, and my level was 12. That I was out in the sunshine on the weekends. I got all kinds I thought I was getting good sun. My level was 12, and it would be a whole lot better if it was over 30. And we get continued benefit for osteoporosis up to 50. So I decided it's time for me to take vitamin D. Another thing that happens is when you give huge doses, the liver can only handle so much. And the large doses don't last very long in the bloodstream. They kind of disperse out. So we now know that it's better to give smaller doses on a regular basis than large doses. So someday I'm going to have an opportunity to share that with Dr. McDougall, but I don't want to do it in an antagonistic sort of a way. You understand?
Because he's never antagonistic.
No, he's never antagonistic.
What would be your recommendation for a dose of vitamin D? What dosage would you recommend?
I'm taking 5,000 international units.
A day?
The Institute of Medicine has stated that 4,000 IUs is safe, the highest, safest level per day. I'm taking 5,000. They base that 4,000 on one observational study of like 10 people where one person got a pancreatic cancer, and they said, well, maybe, but they're making population kind of decisions, so they have to be cautious. There's other evidence that raising, for example, that vitamin D level up to 50 nanograms per cc, you can give a little more protection for the bone. There are doctors who are finding that it helps the immune system if you go a little higher. Incidentally, sun bunnies, you know, the people who live on the beach in the sun all the time, will get their vitamin D levels up to about 90.
Wow.
So, you know, that's still within the kind of the normal physiologic range for people who are living in the sun. Where sun hits the cholesterol in the skin, turns it into vitamin D. It's not really a vitamin, it's a hormone. It acts like a hormone. Like thyroid, you don't want too much, you don't want too little. You'd like it kind of in that safe range. It provides protection against some cancers. The evidence is pretty strong for that, although not 100% nailed down. It may be helpful for autoimmune diseases, keeping those in control. And these things besides just helping us make strong bones, which is how we came to understand it in the first place.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
So that was a good discussion on vitamin D that we didn't understand all the things it did. Great. We had one more question from Nan. That was, how much water should we drink?
Enough. So this is a real challenge because we don't have good science on this. That, you know, you need 6 to 8 glasses a day. That's the water that you need, and much of that water can actually come from food. Food, when it's broken down, whether it's fats or carbohydrates, and proteins to a lesser degree, but still present, turn into carbon dioxide and water. So it actually includes that. Taking more water may be beneficial. If you get dehydrated, you increase inflammation in the bloodstream. That's a significant kind of stressor and increases total body inflammation in a way that I would want to avoid. So I think staying hydrated is important. At the same time, I see significant number of patients who are drinking so much water that they wash the sodium out. If you get your sodium washed out, you'll feel weak. It doesn't work well. Not enough sodium will actually, and this is very interesting, make your blood pressure go high, make your diabetes worse. So the way I think about water is your urine should have a little color to it, but not be dark. Now, this can be a problem for people who take a lot of B vitamin supplements because that turns their urine yellow, and they could actually be overhydrated. I remember when I was a kid, my father came home with the story of a child or someone who had drunk too much water and killed himself. You remember, we're looking for balance here. Drowning is also, you know, kind of too much water, right? So you can get too much water. But this fella had decided he was going to drink a lot of water. He drank so much, his sodium was so low that he actually put his heart into an arrhythmia and killed himself. So you can get too much, you can get too little. My own kind of rule of thumb, the way I like to do it, is before I eat to get a big glass of water. Generally, that'll be 3 or 4 cups worth. And then I have my meal. And I don't really shirk on the sodium, on the salt, because I know that I need some of that. And with adequate hydration, my kidneys will manage that salt fairly well, certainly in the range that I'm taking it. You can get too much, I understand. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Look at your urine. Is it slightly yellow? You're probably doing okay. that big glass of water before the meal generally means that I have some clear urine for a while. And then maybe later in the day, it may turn a little bit darker, but that's okay. If I take too much water too long, I'll wash out my kidney's ability to concentrate urine and could put myself at more risk for dehydration. So, it's a balance that we're looking for. I cannot give you a definite how much you should take.
Okay, great. One thing in your podcast, and if y'all haven't listened to his podcast, I highly recommend it. There'll be a follow-up email that'll go to all those who registered on Eventbrite, and it will have the link to his podcast. So you might want to listen to this one. This is one we were talking about when we were practicing the other day. When you eat is as important as what you eat. That's your quote.
Okay, Kathy, you put me right up on my soapbox.
Yep, I knew she was going to do that to you.
So yeah, I think that when you eat maybe is important from a physiologic standpoint. German fellow in the Wisconsin area, if I remember correctly, who had done this study in a metabolic ward where he fed people 2,000 calories a day. And they eat or in the evening. And it was across the morning. So what he found out was that with the same calories, if you eat them in the morning, they're more likely to be burned. People lost weight on the 2,000 calories when they had it in the morning, not so in the evening. And that makes sense. And I shared this with Kathy earlier this week. If you're flying from here to Paris, wherever you are, let's say Orlando to Paris, do you want the fuel in the airplane here or after you get to Paris? It has a gestalt to it. You put the fuel in now. And indeed, our bodies work better when we fuel in at the beginning of the day. The science is really good on that for people with diabetes. The intermittent fasting concept, which leaves you not enough calories for kind of part of the day, or not food for the part of the day. Get all your food in the kind of one part of the day, preferably the early part of the day, the first 6 hours or so, and then nothing after that. Helps to reverse fatty liver, which helps to improve our cholesterol and decrease our diabetes. So this pattern of eating can be extremely important. So it goes beyond eating. We could even add, I suppose, exercise, right? If you will exercise, for example, moderate exercise, a moderate walk that's not taking your breath away, but exercising a little bit after you eat, let's say 10 or 15 minutes, you'll decrease the amount of insulin you need to control your blood sugar. If insulin is lower, you already know that from the previous discussion that high insulin increases our risk of hypertension and drives our cholesterol and our weight up. So you can keep that insulin down by doing a little walking right after a meal. So there's kind of a timing. Does when you exercise make a difference? Yes, it does. You exercise before a meal, it makes your tissues more sensitive. There's actually benefit from exercising both before and after. And of course, the more active we are, generally, the healthier we are, certainly in the long term. So many of us have jobs that leave us sitting behind desks and staring at computers. This is not ideal for health. So adding that extra exercise in on purpose, purposely adding it in, can be good for your health. Did I cover that well enough, Kathy, or did you want me to say something else as well?
I just thought it was an interesting idea. Dr. Greger talks about it in How Not to Diet. And just to tell the group, when we were going to have this event over in at the Advent Health Field House here in the spring, I told Dr. Guthrie we were going to buy his meal, and he said, well, he doesn't eat dinner. And at the time I thought, well, that's crazy. But you don't eat dinner, do you? You eat breakfast and lunch, is that right?
Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper. If you really want the benefits of intermittent fasting, you probably better leave off that even a small evening meal. And, you know, it's pretty amazing what intermittent fasting does. Not only does it decrease fatty liver, which we've mentioned already, but you also improve your brain, your memory. You make more brain cells. This is a very positive thing to help us maintain our brain health. I do have one of the, what they call the ApoE4 genes. I've got one of them, and there's in my body, and that gives me about a 75-80% chance of having a normal brain that is not having Alzheimer's at age 80. So I'm making plans, right? I'm deciding. I'm eating a lot of plants. I'm using the intermittent fasting. I'm exercising regularly. All things to try. I'm learning new things. I'm trying to learn new things all the time. Trying to keep that brain working. You notice I didn't say I had a 25 to 30% chance of getting Alzheimer's. I said I had a 75 to 80% of having a normal brain. So I'm working on that side.
Like that, just like that. Okay, we had one more question about a kidney disease issue called IC, and can plant-based diet help with that?
I'm not sure what IC is referring to, so I do not know.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We got one person. Dorothy says she does intermittent fasting by eating her first meal at 11 a.m. and then an early dinner. So she's doing it similar. Her day is starting later and then ending later. Is that the same idea?
Well, that's the same idea, and when people are given a choice, that's often the way they do it. And it will reverse fatty liver, but when the two are compared for diabetes, and we have a study that does that looks at randomly assigned to either skipping breakfast or skipping supper. The skipping supper does better.
Okay. And go ahead, Vicki.
What is a good time? I know they talk about eating windows and fasting windows. So what is, in a 24-hour day, what would be a good eating window and a good fasting window?
Generally, you say about 6 hours is your eating window.
Okay.
Now, that's when you're putting food in. To actually reach the fasting state where the benefit occurs takes 8 to 12 hours. So if, for example, you eat your last meal at, let's say, 1 p.m., and it's a moderately large meal, it may be 1 a.m. before you actually reach the fasting state, and your benefits will be from there to when you have your breakfast next.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, and so I want to make sure everybody knows this. The follow-up email will tell you how you can get his book for 40% off. He arranged it so we could get a discount to those that are with us in Eventbrite and Zoom. And thank you very much.
And when she says 40% off, I did not cut any pages out, okay? It's the whole book, not 60% of it.
There's another book that I'm excited to take that same discount for. It's called the Eat Plants, Feel Whole Journal, right? Can you tell us about that one?
Yes, I can. The Eat Plants, Feel Whole Journal is to help people on their journey. And there's a little writing in the first 50 pages, but then there's an option for you to get points for each of the good things that you do. You know, if you have a fruit or a vegetable, you get points. You can even get extra credit. But you also get credit for exercise. You get credit for doing a kind deed for somebody, for being thankful for something. It's just to help people get a healthier lifestyle. And the reports we're getting from people who are using it are very positive, and I hope that it might be able to help some of you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Again, I want to tell you his podcast has 15 short interactions with him and an interviewer, and they are very good. They're full of lots of stories that zero in on concepts that we can learn together. So, Dr. Guthrie, I don't know how to thank you enough. This has just been wonderful. You're a real pro at using Zoom, so that made it really nice, especially once we got the link to you and made you a co-host. But yes, thank you so much. This was really, really good.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure sharing, and I want to wish everybody really success at your lifestyle changes. It takes a little while for your body to get rid of some of the changes that have come from years of bad habits, but it's amazing how much healing can take place when you start to treat your body correctly. So to your health.